feature for any questions or comments you may have throughout the session. All we ask is that you keep it respectful and positive. And so with that, we're excited. And so we'll just go ahead and jump right on into it. And so we're going to start with our part one of the panel questions. So it's going to be a series of 3 questions, followed by a video presentation. And then afterwards, we'll go into our last 3 questions for today. And so with that, our very first question is, what does Black joy mean to you? And so either of you, if you'd like to just jump in.
Okay, I'll jump in. You'll probably hear my sentiments repeated later with Lori, because I very much agree with her. Black joy to me is joy. And I think that when we talk about uplifting, joy is not necessarily always happiness, right? Also, for me anyway, it is also about just what brings you joy. What can you stop and think about that brings you joy? What are your blessings? What are something you can celebrate? And in a time of, really racial reckoning of 2020 and kind of feeling like we're heading back to the 60s of civil rights, we're really looking at things that can remind us of the positive. And I think for me, what are the positive parts that are not showing up in media or not showing up in some of the negative comments that you might be getting or that I might be getting? That's what I have to remind myself of. And, so for me, there's so many ways to look into that. And I think it really comes back to gratitude and celebration.
The way I perceive Black joy, it's in a fragmented world that we have been able to endure. Black joy is a celebration in the middle of sorrow. And it's like chewing onions and licorice at the same time. How do we do that in the middle of so much pain? But it's when you can get to the depths of joy, there's an overwhelming celebration that a person experiences it in the middle of the sorrow.
Yeah, thank you both so much for sharing your insights into the first question. I love how there was this common theme of gratitude in the midst of so much that's going on. And I think that's something really important that both of you highlighted. So thank you. And so the next question is, where do you personally find Black joy? And are there any resources that you could possibly recommend, such as any social media sites, books, podcasts, etc.?
I'll let Ken go first. I'm still pondering the onions and licorice.
So where do I find Black joy? Is that the question?
Yes.
I find it personally through the scriptures, because weeping endures for a night. And sometimes the night seems long, but then joy, in our spiritual life brings a celebration. And I like to read books of a lot of heroes, Black heroes like Harriet Tubman and Crispus Attucks, and all the different people that went through struggles from the past and how they endured it, how they weathered the storms and were able to persevere under great hardship. So it's inspirational to read those books. There's another one, don't have it at the moment, but just being inspired by those from the past and present who learned how to have joy in the midst of intense struggles. Mm-hmm. And so Frederick Douglass is another one. He says that men want crops without plowing up the ground, and uh, they want the rain without the thunder and lightning. It's that kind of inspiration that I enjoy.
Hmm.
Well, for me, I kind of, it depends what mood I'm in, right? I think for sometimes I want something silly. Sometimes I want something fictional. Sometimes I want something non-fictional when I'm trying to look for things. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about that moment, especially because there are so few of us, right? That moment where I see another friend and they say, hey, guess what? I found a braider. I'm getting my hair braided because it's just something that's very rare. Or, hey, did you know there's a new Ethiopian restaurant? Oh my gosh, no way. Hey, let's go check it out. And I think hearing about things that are very common in other communities that are not so common here, that's that moment where we're able to share something relatively superficial in common that just is so exciting, but it's also a great connector to what else is going on and leads to more conversation or leads to getting something a little deeper because we're going to go to that lunch place together or something. The other thing I find is back to that resources aspect is taking the time sometimes to really look for educational moments. I've gone, for Mother's Day a couple of years ago, I said, I want to go to the California African American Museum. So we took a plan and we went down there, and my kid, our kid put up with it, and my husband and I, and we all went down there. Or, I was in DC for for a memorial last year. And so I made a plan to go there a day early so I could go see the African American Museum. And a few weeks before that, started listening to Ibram X. Kendi's book that really, truly prepared me for being at the museum, because there's so much going through 400 years of the Black experience from slavery to rap music. It was amazing. And it really prepared me in that place. And sometimes just the fictional aspect of books, because I find the fictional, sometimes I'm going to think of some other fake character that was going through some of this perseverance, but realistically, it's what we're going through still today. I mean, I'm reading a book, I think it's On the Rooftop or Off the Rooftop, and we're talking about gentrification and some of the challenges and some of the awesome music, but also some of the segregation. And, it's all a fictional book, but yet similar to issues that we're still dealing with today. But I don't have to I don't almost have to envelop it and live it because it's fictional. It's not non-fictional. And so for me, that's sometimes just what I need to have a little bit of removal of that space. Oh, and then on the silly side, sorry, I had to say this, is that, I've loved, it's over now, but Blackish, or on HBO, there's a show, it's kind of like Sex and the City, called Harlem. Absolutely love it. It's a little bit risque, so I'll just say that for right now. But it's just like that women getting together, girlfriends getting together, chatting, eating, hanging out, sharing life, and sharing in a life in a way that you don't see that often on TV these days. So it's really cool to have some of those experiences. And I'm sad of Bill Cosby, because it makes me just, obviously not want to look at anything about the Cosby Show anymore. But that was an amazing show at the time when I was young, and really, really tackled some challenging issues in a fun way.
Another resource is from Slavery to Freedom by John Hope Franklin. And he charts the journey from Emancipation Proclamation through where we are today. Charts the journey of African Americans from their origins through slavery and struggles for freedom. He shows the various migrations and continued quest for racial equality. So those are just some other resources I'd like to make available.
Darius, we do have a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to handle it now or wait a while. From Shannon: how do we build bridges between islands of Black joy in our community?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, would either of our panelists love to answer this one? Once again, the question
Sure. I
is,
mean,
yeah, oh, go for it.
so how do we build bridges and islands of Black joy? I love that. You know, one of the things I think is important is that we're willing to learn and listen from each other. We had a diversity task force in 2020 at the city council level, and I was on the steering committee and then eventually on the council, I'm sorry, on the task force. And one of the things that we did was really, we had sessions where we truly listened to different marginalized communities and just said, what is going well for you? What's not going well for you? What could you use as resources? And really just, listening. And that's part of it, right? And then getting to that point of, okay, now that we know this, what do we do? I am 50 years old, and I'm still learning to say it out loud. I'm 50 years old, and I grew up with Sesame Street and Electric. Oh my gosh, totally just blanked on the second part of it. Anyway, this other PBS show, and hey, you guys was like the common way we all referenced each other, okay? And taking that guys out of my vocabulary, thank you, Electric Company, thank you, has been a really big challenge. And just because it was so familiar, such a common thing to say for me. But realistically, that is not inclusive for people who use different pronouns. And so, realizing, okay, sometimes just saying, hey, y'all, hey, folks, hey, everyone, just changing a simple couple of words all of a sudden starts with that inclusive experience, right? So I think that for me is when we talk about learning from each other, what are those words that we're saying that are really just offensive to each other? Or what are those words that really bring us in? And I think instead of calling people out, I'm a big fan of calling people in. I know that not all activists go that way, and that's totally fine. Everyone gets their own way of doing things. But to me, I think really calling people in when things are offensive is really helpful. And then really looking at like the services and or products on like a business side of things is, what do we not have here that many people are asking for that would make them be like, hey, I can make my favorite meal, no problem now. But, instead of having to go onto Amazon, order some spices to make the food that I normally would make, or even celebrate our own holidays that, people don't know where to go. So I think just really helping make resources available to each other and share what's needed.
Regarding building bridges and islands of Black joy, I just go back to my childhood in Paso Robles and growing up on Riverside Avenue. There was a well-organized village of about, I'd say, 30 to 40 families. I think I had 7 or 8 mothers, and they kept me in line when mother wasn't around. So they were a part of that village. That's an island, it was like an island, and it was it was so rich. The Black American Church was down there. We had a building right at the south gate of the Mid-State Fair. There was a little building, and all the people on Riverside Avenue that had come in, they had migrated to Paso from Louisiana, all parts of the country, to the whole block of Riverside Avenue. It was truly a village. It was truly remarkable, even to this day. The camaraderie from house to house and unlocked doors and playing in the field and hide and go seek and all of that. It was rich because we were unified, and celebrating. You're talking about joy to a high extent, and I observed all that as a small child, and to this day, that concept is so rich, and it could spread to the broader community if people wanted to buy into it. So that was truly a joyful time, even to this day.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you both so much for sharing. And so with that, one of the threads that was brought up with along with Black joy, but also this gratitude and how we can really utilize that to express it. And so one of the final questions that we have for this part one is, what are some ways that you like to express joy or gratitude?
Huh. I think for gratitude, for me, I've tried, I don't always do it every day. I'm not great with a daily, but I try to really stop and think at least once a day, a few things I'm grateful for. I try to do a mindfulness practice in the morning when I can. And that often starts with thinking about what I'm grateful for. And that just brings a whole new sense. When I get started without that, it's a huge, huge difference, and it puts me in a different mindset. As far as just joy in general, I think that kind of comes with it, right? Is stopping to remember how to celebrate something. I am so busy at work, and I work a 30-hour job at Cal Poly that is more than 30 hours. But anyway, I also work a 30-hour job with Mayor. My husband and I, we have two sons, have some friends and want to, socialize with them every now and then. And why I say all that is like, it's go, go, go. Okay, I've got this meeting, this meeting, this meeting. I'm going to a panel, going to this meeting, this meeting. Okay, do this work. And so when I do this, it's really easy to just keep going to the next thing, keep going to the next thing. And stopping and celebrating, what did I accomplish today? Just name a few things, and I'm sure you've all heard of kind of like that 3, 2, 1. What are 3 things that have gone well, 2 things that are a challenge, and 1 thing you'd like to change altogether, or 1 thing you'd like to shout from the rooftop. It just depends kind of how you've heard it. But I think that's really important in remembering for ourselves, because when we don't, or when I don't, it's definitely everything kind of like a black cloud over the top of me, that everything's going wrong. Oh, I got to do all this work and I can never get it done. So instead of doing that, really realizing, wow, look at all the stuff we just did and where are we going for the future? And I do want to go back to something that was said too about the building bridges in islands. Also recognizing our own identities, right? I mean, I think that for me, I personally am a half Black woman, half Black, half white woman. I know that I have a privilege by having light skin. I can put my hair back. I can dress whatever way the group is dressing in front of me and walk in that room, and less people turn their head. And when someone else walks in, that maybe Ken walks in, people are going to turn their head and wonder who that is. And I think we have to recognize that when we say, oh, why don't you just do this? Or why don't you just do that? There's a lot of identities that are coming with you when you ask these questions that sometimes just feels like overwhelming when someone says that. So I just wanted to kind of bring that back to is realizing your identities when you're talking to someone is really important.
And just to piggyback that, which Erica just shared, through years of enduring that, it's joy that allows you to weather that kind of a storm. It's the joy on the inside to be able to have a sense of self strong enough to endure that moment. And so that's where you have to protect your joy from the predators who intend to kill, steal, and destroy that. The predators are real. It's more of a spiritual battle. And so you have to guard your joy because those moments for the Black American experience are very real. You won't understand it if you haven't walked in the shoes. When you walk in those shoes, you've learned how to guard your joy. And so when those attacks come, you're able to persevere and press through that. And you're liberated in the middle of that type of bondage. I worked incarceration for years, and I've had to understand the concept of incarceration, and hate is like that. Hate, there are shackles that hate and sorrow wants to put on a person. But you have to know, there's a way to guard your joy in the middle of that intensity. And it gets to the point where it's a continual work in progress. Is because you don't know how the attack will come this time, how the attack will come next time. It's usually the same because hate doesn't change. But in the middle of all of that, you can protect the joy, and it carries you through the moment. It's like going through a cloudy place, and then eventually that, with the joy that you have, it just moves the cloud out the way, and you have a breath of fresh air again. So it's something you have to live to understand it fully.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, 400 souls. Yeah, thank you both so much for sharing your insights into these questions. And so right now we're about halfway through with the panel questions. And so we think now is a good time for us to take a moment to watch the video presentation. So we'll go ahead and pull that up. And so as we're watching it, we encourage you all to reflect on any questions that you have. And feel free just to drop them in the chat, and then we could use them as we go into the part 2 of our panel for today.
Okay, so with regard to Black joy, I would say that for me, it's just joy involving Black people, if we're calling it Black joy. It's come up in the media as Black joy, as a way to just label it kind of in the media and also in the project itself. I understand that. But in reality, in regular life, as a Black person, I just see it's just joy. And so putting the emphasis on the fact that it's Black joy in the media kind of gives it a segue into the media, and I understand that. But in general, joy is joy, and labeling it Black joy or some other kind of joy doesn't really change that it's just joy. And that's the way I think of it in my personal life. But I understand the need to create the emphasis in the media it's like to counteract, the horrific things we see with regard to the Black community. And so use the phrase Black joy. So that's my answer to the first question. Well, I do, there is the whole aspect of the media swaying and leaning in different directions. And also the fact that the media is just generally negative. And so everything the media does kind of has a negative spin on it. It has a bias, I think, towards the Black community, and maybe exacerbating or expressing more negativity with regard to the Black community. And so I think that Cruz's project was just trying to counteract and balance and bring some kind of equilibrium, I guess, if you will, to this aspect of the fact that the media can put more emphasis on the Black community in terms of negativity. Well, I have in the past tended to lean towards images of children, and I have had a phase where I have leaned towards like Black children and smiling and happy kids and stuff. So there's joy in that. In terms of other images in the media, I don't know. I would look to Cruz for that. I can't really think of folks off the top of my head. What's coming to my mind, which I'll show my age here, is the opening of, and I don't remember who the artist is, but the painting at the beginning of Good Times, to me, kind of displayed, especially maybe, I think it was Black joy in the church. joy is a source of healing and community building, and it's a source of joy and healing and community building in any community, in any circumstance. You know, if neighborhood block club in the neighborhood, or, you know, a group of women, or a group of fluid gender people, or, you know, whatever. I mean, so you know, it can be segregated into, you know, the Black community as well. It can be segregated into any community, in my mind, that is working with joy, and can also be used as, in a way, a form of resistance, depending on what's happening. I think it's a form of resistance with regard to the media, like in every way, like displaying joy in any context, you know, with regard to the media, in terms of Black people, in terms of just anything that we see on the media that's negative, like where's the positive side of this, or something, some aspect of something positive that's happening. I mean, just in the Black community, especially the older Black community, I feel like that's where a lot of joy has been found in the past. I don't know that that's so much true anymore of the younger generations, but I know the older generations, you know, really leaned heavily on the church as a source of joy, as a source of hope, all those things. Just to understand that it's the media, it's not what the media, we are not what the media portrays. Just continuing to hammer that point, that Black people are not what the media portrays. That Black people are just like everybody else in terms of, you know, the wide range of emotions and all of that. And so the Black Joy Project just seems to really want to counteract that and make it clear that we are just like everybody else, in our lives. And so that is all I would say. Can't think of anything that I liked. Well, maybe a little something, which is just to reinforce what I just said, is that we just, you know, Black people just live their lives just like everybody else. Some have heavier emphasis on the cultural aspects of their life, just like everybody else. Like there are cultures where, or the folks that just put more cultural emphasis in their lives, whatever culture they're from. And some folks just put less cultural emphasis in their lives. I'm probably someone who doesn't carry my like Blackness around with everything I do. I just live my life. And so, and there's it's wide variety, just like everybody else. Well, you can find the archives of my work at laurienorris.com. And I'm constantly working on projects, even if they're just practice projects, challenges for myself to create better work later. Right now, my emphasis is more on challenges like that. Completing series of things, of practices, of kind of drills is more where I am right now. But for completed work, yes, laurienorris.com. And I'm teaching classes, and the practices that I'm doing, I'm kind of doing a lot of them along with my students, because they're good to just repeat over and over and over. And so I have the Emeritus drawing class on Wednesdays on the North Campus. And I also have an everyday class, every weekday class from 8:30 to 9:30 through Cuesta that is online, that is available. And it's an Emeritus class, but it's available to everyone. But it's really a practice class. We just get in there for an hour every morning and practice. And so it's a fairly simple class. You don't have to have any really kind of skill set. You can just join and you can just practice along.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to Laurie Norris for her video presentation and her insight into the questions. And so with that, we'll go into our final few questions that we have And so the first one is Cleaver Cruz, who is a Black queer creative, asserts that Black joy can be a source of healing and community building. Is there anything that you'd like to comment or expand on this idea?
I actually come
Can you
back.
all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ken. I just all of a sudden disappeared.
Okay. Now you can go, Erica.
Well, I was just going to say that I was trying to think about like those moments that I've been celebrating Black joy at times. And I think for me, because we live in a community where there are not many Black people, I do relish the times when I go to a Noir Slow event or a Black Faculty Staff Association event from Cal Poly, because we welcome all the community members as well as faculty and staff, because there are so few people here. I get to see people from Paso to Solvang and everywhere in between. And that's just really fun, because it's like, then I'm not the one or the two people in the room. And just sharing and hearing from each other. Juneteenth celebrations were also really great this last year. One, continuing to learn and know more about Juneteenth, but also, again, just being able to celebrate and hear great music and hear food and hear people laughing and smiling, or seeing them smile. I'm part of the African American Caucus for the Cal Cities on my mayor's side. I'm actually on the board. And, sharing what's happening in different communities, and, what's happening in Compton is different than what's happening in here. What's happening in Ventura is different than what's happening in Lemon Grove. Just hearing about what other people are doing in other locations is awesome. And some people, the little things that we do means nothing, because it's like a majority Black area. So they're like, yeah, why would you not do that? So I think it's been, to me, just really enjoyable to just see other people and share what we're all doing and how we're all celebrating in our lives, or just living our lives at times.
So Cleaver asserts that Black joy can be the source of healing and community building. Is definitely with the past Black Americans went through slavery up until the present time. And there was a celebration then, and there's a celebration now, when we understand how, and I could keep going back to the village concept, can provide healing and community building, when we learn how to express that, because joy is universal, and it transcends barriers and obstacles, and so it's available, to help build a healthier community with all of the human race, because that's what we're really looking at. It's not just the color line, because we are a part of the human family, and so that's the source of healing. And joy is in the middle of that, bringing us together, allowing us to celebrate, and to celebrating a healthier community where love prevails, joy. They're all in the same car, if you will. Faith, hope, love, and joy. And the goal is to help us to get along in this world, and help make this world a better place for all of us.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and so with that, we'll go into the fifth question. Shante Joseph, they published this article of what Black joy means, and he wrote that revealing joy is an act of resistance. What are your thoughts on this?
I think Lori mentioned, in the media, it's always about, it's a lot about violence and negative portraying. In fact, there's a diversity, equity, inclusion training that I facilitate at Cal Poly, and it talks about, I think, oh gosh, who was it? I want to say it was Wall Street Journal that put together these short clips, and I'd be happy to share them later. And there was this gentleman who came on. He was, African American, and he'd seen so much violence in the media that he thought, oh, okay, well, that must mean that all Black men have violence, all Black men are angry. And he's thinking, but I'm not angry and I'm not violent. And so as a kid, he was struggling with this in his life. And so I think part of it is, just to be able to share smiles and joy and just what's happening, I mean, someone's getting married, someone's getting a new job, all the same things that everyone celebrates, and just not to make it almost a Black thing. It doesn't really need to be a Black thing, but then the reason we're sharing the positive is to counterbalance the negative that's happening in the media. And, I kind of a little bit back to the last question too, that I didn't think about earlier, was the vigil. We had a vigil for Tyre Nichols that NAACP hosted. And I think about that's a moment where we're actually sharing about the joy of Tyre Nichols more, at least in my speaking, more than the horrific acts. We all knew the horrific acts that happened to bring him to his death and the murder, but we also need to celebrate that he was a father and he was a skateboarder and he loved his mom, and like those are the things that we should be remembering in life. As far as legal policies, we could go on about that, but that's something that's different. That's not the joy about, let's remember him in the positive side. So I think that part of the resistance is, let's not then have negative to negative to negative to negative and just keep going down, down, down.
When I think about an act of resistance, joy is stronger within you than the sorrow outside of you. So you can see how that would be an act of resistance. The person who has joy has the capability of liberating the oppressor. It's a powerful tool that can be used to help liberate the person who is infested by hate. So joy becomes the liberator from oppression. It is an act of resistance. So the person who has the joy can help take the shackles, if you will, off of the oppressor. I worked in a state correctional facility at San Quentin and Old Folsom. At San Quentin, I had the privilege. I was charged at different points to take individuals from one place to the other, and they had to be in restraints. And so when I got to where I was going with the individual, I was able to take the restraints off of the individuals, and they were free to move. Joy has that power. Take the restraints off and the shackles of the oppressor. So not only is the person who has the joy free, but he has the capability, that person has the capability to help liberate the oppressor. It's a powerful dynamic. And that's the act of resistance, as I see it. Joy delivers the oppressed and the oppressor.
Definitely.
We had another question in the chat, Darius. This was from Shannon. She wanted to know if Erica could tell us a little more about the meetup that she'd been going to, the family meetups.
Oh, Noir Slow. Yeah, Courtney Hale, who is executive director of Race Matters, for a while now, I guess probably about 4 years, has been setting up different events. So we had, we met at the Penny, for example, and there were Black-owned wineries that came and poured their wine, and we had a DJ, and different time we had a singer, and usually it's just advertised through either Race Matters or the Black Faculty Staff Association, different organizations, the employee resource groups of a couple different larger businesses like MindBody, et cetera, and just trying to encourage, getting together and sharing Black joy, quite honestly. We met at the wine station. I forget exactly what it was called, but used to be an old gas station at South Higuera and kind of High Street-ish area. And these are just events where people just socialize. There was no major reason. There was no fundraisers. It was like, hey, let's just have some time to hang out. And we did those, kind of cheesy-ish icebreakers and just had a lot of fun. So we've there are a couple different Black DJs like Soul Dust and DJ Kevon and DJ Malik. There's just a few different people that have Black-owned businesses. They want to share what they have, and if people are interested. And that's also really had some good conversations around for the Chamber of Commerce, and they started adding, if you'd like to highlight that you're a minority-owned business, you can. If you'd like to highlight you're a Cal Poly alum business, you can. So it's really about, I think, when we share things that we want, that's how we can actually get to the point that more people are aware, and raising that awareness then leads to action, I feel.
Yeah, thank you. And so with that, we'll go into one of our last questions, which is, what would you like non-Black allies to know about Black joy, or anything else that we've talked about here today?
Go ahead, Ken. I've been going first the whole time. It's up to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Erica. That joy is universal and transcends the color line. Joy is strong and resilient and liberates one from oppression, aggravation, hate, animosity, and sorrow. That's what I would like the non-Black allies to know about Black joy.
Thank you, Ken. I think I share what Ken is saying is what brings you joy? And I think thinking about that is kind of the first step, right? Is that something that the person that you're talking to also feels? And it's a great starter of conversation. I would say that I've had more challenging conversations around what each person thinks of as joy when it comes to money, more than when it comes to a marginalized identity. We all cry the same. We all feel the same pain. We all bleed the same. When we have, when we have a brand new baby, the joy that we all feel that you are filled with, that is that same joy. A wedding is the same joy. These cultural norms that associate or that accompany the joy may be different. And I think that there's this balance of go learn on your own versus someone that's willing to share with you. And I think you have to just ask the person that you're talking to, hey, how do you want to be identified? How can I help? Do you need an ally in this time? And not assuming they need someone to come and be their savior. Oh, we need a white savior right now. But also not assuming that, oh, they're strong, let them do it on their own. Just the assuming is never a good thing. We all learned that in, I think, like 7th grade, right? So I think, really coming and saying, hey, I want to be an ally in this situation. I've heard about this issue, and is there anything I can do? And sometimes the answer is no, thank you, but thank you for even just offering. That's really kind. And sometimes it's like, wow, yes, I'd love some help. And I think that is really important. And I think also going back to the assuming, part of that African American caucus I was talking to you about earlier, sometimes people think they're being allies, and by trying to speak the way that they think that you should speak I've had people start speaking Ebonics to me, which is absurd. I've had some really interesting conversations based on that, or based on some other assumptions. So I'll just go back to the assumptions part, the not assuming part, and just ask the person. I'm fine with answering questions. You know, obviously I'm here. I'm happy to do that, because I feel like, hey, that's my role in life. I'm good with it. Some people are like, please read a book, don't ask me. And so I think there's the other part of it too, is yes, do read a book, do listen to a podcast. I mean, I love Code Switch podcast. There's a Generation Mixed podcast I love. There's tons of NPR podcasts. Ibram X. Kendi, like I said earlier. I mean, there's How to Be an Anti-Racist, Shola Richards. I mean, we could just go on and on, right? I think if you literally just type in Google Black books, pretty sure there's a resource list that are just all over the place at this point. And we're here at the Cuesta Library, so I'm sure you have some lists of great books, or the Office of Diversity, et cetera. So I think there is an importance in going ahead and educating yourself too, right? I mean, I whether it's the new Jim Crow around the laws that used to exist in the U.S. And also continuing to learn about different things. You know, I'm trying to learn more about immigrants. I'm trying to learn about the LGBTQ plus community. I'm trying to learn more about our Asian Pacific Islander Desi American friends. I'm trying to learn more about Native Americans, and especially our Chumash here and our Selenian tribes here. And there's a map that you can get online that shows you, like, I came from Santa Rosa before I came to SLO, the tribes that were there and all over the U.S. So I think just educating ourselves, but also being willing to listen and just asking, hey, how can I help? How can I be an ally?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think those are two really great points to end off. First, yeah, that joy is this universal feeling. And then second, the importance of just asking. So thank you both so much for providing your insights today. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we just hop off?
No, just thank you very much for having me. Thank you for having this panel. Black History Month is a great month because we're always all trying to learn about all these new people. I've got on my Erica SLO City Mayor social media, I'm trying to highlight different Black people in our history. Some of them you've probably heard before, like our Hidden Figures, Catherine, or whether you're someone new. And just continue to learn and continue to ask questions and continue to be open. Whatever History Month or Recognition Month, Women's History Month is coming, Asian Pacific Islanders coming, Hispanic Heritage Month is coming. You can go on and on. But the reality is we all live here on this earth all together. And so we shouldn't need a specific Recognition Month or Recognition Day to continue to learn and just, grow together.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. The human family is going through quite an experience, but there's something about joy that will make us stronger. Learning how to express that and respect, the whole of the human family. So to make this world a little bit better for all of us. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely. And
Curious too, we want to see if there's any other questions from the audience. I'm
Yeah,
not seeing anything new in the chat, but if anybody is being shy and they want to say something.
all right. So if any of you have any questions as well, feel free to email the Cuesta Library and they'll get you in contact with our panelists if you have any other questions after today's event. So with that though, thank you so much to our panelists for joining today and really sharing their insight into the topic of Black Joy. We'd love to give them all a virtual round of applause. So thank you.
Erica, have a great day, rest of the day.
Thank you, you too.
And all of you too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.